We are really, really pleased to be here to talk about the importance of community violence intervention and reducing violence in our communities. My name is Amy Solomon. I'm the Assistant Attorney General at the Office of Justice Programs, and I'm just thrilled to be taking part in this effort. I want to especially thank and acknowledge Representative McBath for sponsoring today's event. I know she couldn't join us, but we're really grateful for her strong and very personal commitment to this issue. And thanks to all of our colleagues from Capitol Hill who joined us here today. Just a bit about OJP, the Office of Justice Programs. We are the Department of Justice's largest grant-making office. We also house the science agencies, the National Institute of Justice and the Bureau of Justice Statistics. And our mission at OJP is focused on increasing community safety, building community trust, and really strengthening the community's role as co-producer of public safety. And this community violence intervention and prevention initiative that we're here to talk about today really embodies every aspect of that mission. And we know that the need for impactful programs like CVI could not be more urgent. Gun violence is far too common. It devastates too many families and too many communities. A recent study indicates that half of all U.S. adults said that they or a family member had been threatened with a gun, had lost a family member to gun violence, or that they had personally witnessed someone being shot. And we know that the toll that is even higher among communities of color who disproportionately bear the brunt of gun violence. 1 in 3 Black adults say that they worry every day or almost every day about themselves or someone they love that they will be killed or a victim of gun violence. For far too many, they say that gun violence represents a constant threat in their community. This is heartbreaking, this is unacceptable, and this can change, and we can all help that to make that change. So I'm humbled by the strength and the resilience of leaders like Representative McBath, who have turned their immeasurable personal loss into purpose and action in their communities. And I am so encouraged by her commitment and that is shared by so many people in Congress right now, and the coalition who came together and passed the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act last year, which includes 5 years of support for community violence intervention. So last fall, thanks to the Bipartisan Community Safers Act and our appropriation, we were able to award $100 million in CVI grants and research. This was the largest federal targeted investment to these strategies in history, and we are so encouraged by efforts launched and expanded, were funded and made possible by this funding. So you're going to hear about some of that today. And the organizations represented here are among the first wave of CVI grantees. So you're going to hear from the Circle of Brotherhood, Brother Lyle, and the, from Miami. It's got a team here. You're going to hear from the Osborne Association in New York, too. These organizations are 2 exemplars of CVI innovation and leadership. They represent 2 of 47 site-based awards that were made last year across 24 states and territories. Some of these funded community nonprofits, some funded city-led collaboratives, some were seeding new efforts, and some were expanding on CVI efforts that were already working well. You will also hear from 3 of our intermediary grant agencies. We've got LIST, the Local Initiative Support Coalition, the Latino Coalition for Community Leadership, and the Metropolitan Family Services. These amazing organizations are both doing violence reduction work in their communities, and they are working to really grow the capacity of smaller CBOs, both by sub-granting funds to the other organizations and by offering technical assistance to help them grow their capacity. This new intermediary or micro-grant strategy is one concrete way that we're putting our mission into practice, supporting community organizations to be co-producers of public safety. Ultimately, our goal is to build a robust public safety infrastructure that unites leaders in the community, leaders in City Hall, and law enforcement around a shared goal of saving lives. In addition to the site-based awards and the intermediaries, our first tranche of CVI awards also include technical assistance, both to the existing grantees and technical assistance to other jurisdictions who want to get involved in CVI type work. We're supporting research and evaluation too, so that we can learn better what works to save lives and share that knowledge with others. Now, of course, we know that more is needed to meet this moment. We're so pleased that we will be announcing fiscal year 23 CVI grants later in September. The solicitations have recently closed. They are being reviewed, and we'll be really excited to announce these new awards. This will help grow the number of sites that are being funded, grow the technical assistance, grow the research, grow the intermediaries, and really help build the ecosystem of CVI grantees around the country. Couldn't be more encouraged by the momentum in the CVI field. The commitment to save lives is off the charts, and you're going to hear that today. These amazing CVI leaders who've joined us, we've seen many of them in the ground, on the field, in their cities, and we're excited that they're going to be able to share their expertise and their credibility with you. They are using that expertise and that credibility to engage with the highest risk individuals in communities. And we know that that is helping lower the risk of violence and saving lives. So speaking of people with expertise and credibility to make a difference, I want to introduce Eddie Bocanegra, who's going to moderate this session. Eddie serves as Senior Advisor for Community Violence Intervention at the Office of Justice Programs. Many of you know him from his groundbreaking work in Chicago, both at Ready Chicago and in other organizations before then. We are so fortunate to benefit at the federal level of Eddie being not only part of a team, but really leading our CVI efforts from all of our organizations across the Office of Justice. And he could not be more committed to saving lives and to making the most of this historic federal opportunity. So Eddie, in just one moment, is going to introduce our panelists and moderate the discussion. We'll then be joined by Deputy Chief Amato Tingarides. Got that right? The Deputy Chief from LAPD. We're so grateful that she has come here to join us. She will close with some remarks at the end before we open it up for Q&A from all of you. I think to hear from Deputy Chief Tingarides about how in LA they are really doing an incredible job working in concert with CVI organizations towards a shared mission of saving lives. And you'll get a glimpse of that from her today. So I just thank you again for your time, your commitment, and for being here with us. And with that, I will turn it over to my colleague, Eddie Bocanegra. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Assistant Attorney General Solomon, for those kind words and for grounding us into this conversation. It is now my pleasure to introduce our panelists as they share perspective on their work on CVI from around this country and the way they are co-producers of public safety. I want to start off by introducing very briefly, just by name, starting from my left, Richard Morales, followed by Vaughn Bryant, Brother Lyle Mohammed, Keisha Boatswain, and Mona Magid. So I want to start off and just jump into business. And I want to start off with Mr. Morales. A question that I would ask you, but everybody in this panel, which is, can you briefly introduce your organization, speak on the environment in which your organization is working in, and how your work plays a role in public safety?
Thank you, Eddie. For the Latino Coalition for Community Leadership, we started in 2004, and what we were seeing was people coming in and parachuting into our communities with a lot of the resources that our communities were working on. But yet, a few years later, they would leave our communities no better than they found them. So what we started to do was really look at ourselves and figure out what do we need to do differently. And as part of that, we looked at we needed to more deeply resource our community and faith-based organizations. These were the smaller grassroots organizations, ones that lived, worked, worshiped, raised families in the same communities that they were serving. And with that, build capacity around these organizations so they can start to build their own infrastructure and compete for funding and be able to serve their community the best to their ability. We also worked on developing the broader ecosystem. So often, community works in isolation from schools, from workforce development, from law enforcement, and we really needed to bring people together and work more cohesively in a way that leveraged all of our strengths. And a lot of that was through the different relationships that were developed over time and the building of credibility and service to community. You know, a lot of the communities that we work in, people would see them as high poverty, high crime communities, but they're also very vibrant communities. These are business owners, these are families, these are schools and educators. There are people every day that are working to make their community something to be very proud of. So don't want to just look at them at a deficit, but also the strengths that they bring in the community health and safety. Thank you, Eddie.
Thank you. Vaughn?
Ditto. Metropolitan Peace Initiatives is a division of Metropolitan Family Services. We've been around since 2017. We serve primarily as a convener, and in that role as convener, we provide capacity building, training, and technical assistance, fiscal stewardship of a coalition of local providers. So one of our 4 pillars is being hyper-local. So anybody who knows Chicago knows it's a city of neighborhoods. So we have local partners that come together to convene, to learn from each other and do our work together, and Metropolitan is the convener. We also provide some economies of scale through some direct service. So we provide behavioral health services, we provide civil legal aid services, we provide workforce development, and then we work on the sector partnerships, whether it's the police, hospitals, city, county, state, federal government, and the philanthropic community.
Brother Lyle.
Thank you, and good afternoon to everyone. I have the honor of serving as the executive director of the Circle of Brotherhood. And initially, we didn't come together to become an organization. Many of you are familiar with a reality crime show called First 48, which unfortunately was put on the map and made infamous or famous, depending upon your perspective, from violent murders taking place in the city of Miami. And one of those detectives at that time, Urban Ford, who's actually a deputy chief in North Miami now, he saw a rash of murders that were taking place in one of our notoriously violent neighborhoods, but they were becoming cold cases so quick. So he then goes to a local commissioner. She brings about 4 or 5 of us together who are doing great work in the community, but not with each other. And we made a promise to ourselves back in 2012 that we would never allow the issues that we could work on and solve together be bigger than some of the differences that we had. So what's unique about the Circle of Brotherhood is we're primarily Black men from all walk of life. We like to say from the streets to the suites. And for some of you who don't understand, the suites don't always get along with the streets, and the streets don't always get along with the suites. But the many various backgrounds, we say we're one brother, one hood, and we work together, and we have developed some very holistic and comprehensive programming, not just around violence prevention intervention, but around community development as well. I'll pause there.
Thank you. Osborne Association was founded about 90 years ago by prison reformer Thomas Mott Osborne. We serve approximately 10,000 formerly, currently incarcerated people, their children, and their families. We serve these folks, all folks affected by the criminal legal system, through our programs. We try to offer opportunities to heal harm, repair harm, restore their lives so that our participants can thrive. We challenge systems that have been rooted in racism and retribution, and fight for policies and practices to really promote true safety and justice. We're on the grounds in 30 prisons and New York City jails. We serve young people in the community, offering healthy alternatives and pathways and tools for treatment. The program that we're here to discuss today is the Bronx Osborne Gun Accountability Program. BOGAP is a game-changing diversion program and solution to gun violence, implemented in collaboration with the Bronx County District Attorney's Office. We work to propose a place for public safety first in our community, acknowledging that the incarceration of young people is not going to create safe communities, right? It doesn't address any of the root causes why these young people were carrying firearms to begin with, whether it could be trauma or prior victimization. or perceived threats of violence in their communities. So as an alternative, BOGAP provides monitoring, court reporting, and intensive programming that encourages our young people to take responsibility, develop new understandings for safety, and build their skills so that they can lead stable and independent lives as adults. Osborne's programs, many of them are rooted in impacting community violence interventions. We provide behavioral health supports, diversion programs, pretrial assistant programs. All of these contribute to public safety within our communities. Our programs, like ours, acknowledge the capacity of people to make different choices and pursue other avenues for addressing and resolving conflicts, which ultimately makes all of us safer.
Thank you, Keisha. Mona?
Thanks. So I'm representing Local Initiative Support Corporation. We are one of the country's largest community development organizations and the largest community development financial institution. We have been supporting communities for more than 40 years across 38 cities and a presence in over 2,000 rural communities to really kind of focus on revitalization, whether it's through housing, small businesses, schools, health, really understanding that kind of the revitalization aspect and place is a driving force in creating safety in communities and in neighborhoods. Through those 38 offices, we take a very kind of hyper-local neighborhood-based approach. And our national focus on safety and justice has been happening for nearly 30 years. And that really came in to understand that freedom from crime and the fear of crime allows people to come together in those public spaces that are being revitalized. That's the only way to patronize local businesses and really build a sense of belonging and health. So our role in this is to really build kind of a community of practice across the geographies that we're supporting, but really play an integral approach in how place and revitalization really can have a deep impact on safety as well.
Thank you, Mona. As you could tell, the 5 organizations that are representing today could speak on this issue probably for hours, and we could go deep on many of these issues, whether it's workforce, mental health, trauma, the corrections, law enforcement, and the importance of building community. And so I want to go to Brother Lyle, whose story you just, for the second time I got to hear this. You shared it the first time with Assistant Attorney General Sullivan and a few of us were actually in Miami just a few months ago. And we got to hear firsthand from many of your partners, including hospitals as well that were in that room. So the question that I have for you is, what role does cross-sector partnerships play in your work? And you mentioned a little bit of that just a second ago. And how do you build successful collaboration relationships with a range of different partners?
In answering that question and knowing the climate in our country right now, first of all, this work cannot be done without cross-sector collaboration. It cannot be done effectively. And it's kind of interesting as we do this morning, because as I'm thinking about our partners and the collaboration that we work in, we partner with everyone from police officials to individuals who are directly on the ground to healing and justice coalitions that do this work. But how imperative is it? I just received a message this morning that one of our partners, we actually train police in Miami. And the training is so effective that 2 of the local police departments, Dade County and the city of Miami, they don't allow their new cadets to hit the streets until they go through our training. I received word this morning that our director allegedly attempted to commit suicide from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. And that just leads me to say, in terms of partnerships, that none of us are going to escape the plague of violence in which we live under right now. Was it Charles Dickens that said it's the best of times and the worst of times? So with collaborations like police departments and being trained, collaborations while working with hospitals, collaborations by working with people who normally don't even work with the police at all, collaboration with working with blue and red states. Pause there. Collaboration with working with organizations now on a national level who, if we don't get this work right now, the resources that are needed to continue it will not move forward. But I think the success of our collaborative work is that we work from a stance and a point that there are no big I's and little U's. And because of that, everyone is respected at the table equally. And what makes this opportunity monumental is that realistically, new professions have been introduced into the industry of public safety. And public safety is going to go to a much, much higher level when the respect for these new positions reach a level of technical support and also, of course, the resources that are needed so that the respect that is given to the police ever since 1838, when Boston became the first incorporated police bar. So these individuals who are actually doing the work on the ground receive that same type of level. But we cannot do this work without working together. So closing, our CVI work, we work on the ground and in the streets. We work with schools. We work with hospitals, as you said. We also work with police. And many of our initiatives are tailor-made to fit particular communities that have different interests and needs.
Thank you, Bilal. Mona, I'm going to go to you next. LISC has been grounded in many cities across the U.S., several dozen for that matter. And one of the outstanding qualities of work that you've done, ironically, is the quality of life plan. And so your perspective here is really critical as we think about how do we think about community, how do we think about partnerships. So very similar to what I asked Brother Lyle, what are the role of cross-sector partnerships that play in your work? And how do you build successful collaborations, given that you have a track record of doing that?
I think first and foremost, what we see as the success is bringing residents and community to the table. These models have to be driven by the assets in the community, by those impacted. When designing cross-sector teams, we know for certain that it has to include residents. And what we mean by residents is the trusted, the groups that have done the true, authentic community engagement, the groups that have been leading this work for decades in these neighborhoods. So that's the first piece, is making sure that they're at the table as co-producers, as equal participants. Where the success has been is when we create these small cross-sector teams led by community, with law enforcement at the table, with cities at the table. Not just cities kind of deciding on what the law enforcement strategies are going to be, but what about all the other city resources and how they feed into this work. What we've seen so critical to quality of life planning and others is, how is housing engaged? How are we utilizing local parks? How are we embracing the local schools or the hospital, whatever the community assets are? So I think the success for cross-sector for our work has been taking a very neighborhood-based approach, identifying the assets through the voice of community, and really bringing them together for long-term strategic planning. So these partnerships stay together for several years, and we're able to sustain them after. The federal investments in this work have been critical, because that has what allowed these neighborhoods to really go through a planning process together, because that's what quality of life really is, coming together to really co-identify problems and solutions. So I would say long-term investment, being sure that community is at the table right from the start, and being really certain that it's a multi-sector approach, because this cannot just sit with one sector alone.
Thank you, Mona. So I'm going to turn to Vaughn Bryan. Vaughn, my understanding that Metropolitan Family Service has been around for, 140, 150 years, right?
160.
160 years, right? 160 years, one of the largest nonprofits in the state of Illinois. And while you mentioned in your introduction that you've been leading this effort as an executive director since 2017, I could only imagine the challenge that's come around this kind of work. So can you illustrate a couple examples of both the importance of partnership and also just like the progress that you've been able to do in this space?
Yeah, so I would say that the number one challenge, I would say, was when we became the convener of Communities Partnering for Peace. It was gaining the trust of the organizations. A lot of times the local organizations have what we call organizational trauma, where their funding is, spotty over the years, and you have this cycle of getting funding, losing funding, laying people off. And that, creates its own level of trauma. So when we come in as a convener, there's, a trust that has to be gained. And so it's a double-edged sword in the sense that it took us about 2 years to gain trust. But I would say the other side of that is once we did gain the trust and once you do have a solid coalition, it's a lot easier to collaborate cross-sector with a solid collaboration in place because everyone wants to attach themselves to a coalition that's moving in the right direction. Examples of that would be, I'll give you two. One is our work with our hospitals. So University of Chicago Medicine and Advocate Christ have built their own internal trauma recovery teams. And those folks have trained in the Metropolitan Peace Academy with our outreach workers. So you're getting a relationship building, but you're getting understanding cross-sector. The last 2 weeks of June, we just finished our first cross-training where our outreach workers got trained on hospital protocols. So we know that we're going to get some of our participants because they've been shot and they're in a trauma center. So that to the extent that we understand their work, they understand our work, and we build a long-term relationship, it means that we're going to be able to serve those participants in a better way over time. The second one I would say is with Chicago Police Department. Historically, when ceasefire was sort of the main player in the CVI space, now called Cure Violence, we had a spotty relationship with the police. And I would say today we're at an all-time high. One, because CPD is involved in the Metropolitan Peace Academy and how we train our outreach workers. But two, we've been able to codify our professional understanding. They accept now that they can't, work and be seen with our outreach workers, that sort of prevents them from having the credibility they need in their neighborhoods. And then we've also been able to train officers as well, similarly. So we convene community members and they host police officers that are coming to police them in their neighborhood. So there's a community-led training that CPD allows us to administer. And I think that has built a stronger relationship in terms of a long-term relationship with the neighborhood policing initiative and CPD over time because they're allowing the community to have a voice in how they're policed.
Thank you, Vaughn. Thank you so much for those examples. I want to just shift gears here on the questions, and I'm going to be looking at Rich Morales here. Amy Solomon pointed out the importance of these resources, $100 million last year. We're hoping to put another $100 million in sometime in September. And so a question for you is, how do you feel federal resources awarded to your organization support your mission? And what has that funding made possible so far?
Well, as we're being shared up here, this is a really complex problem. It's not one agency or one perspective that's going to fix this. And so this funding is really filling a critical gap in community where community safety, community is often underfunded to be a part of or effectively partake in the community safety approach. So this allows our communities, one, to have a consistency, a modicum of funding to know that they're able to pay for and have a consistent staff that's going to be available to not only the community, but to law enforcement, say, here's what's happening, here's what we're seeing, here's how we can collaborate, here's where the clear lines of communication are, here's how we work together, here's how, we work safely together, as was pointed out. So a lot of these things are becoming critical because in that vacuum, a lot of things occur or don't occur when that funding isn't there, isn't present. A lot of the community-based organizations work off different types of funding and, bake sales and car washes don't get it done. It's that simple. So this type of response, then there's other needs that communities have this is also able to fill. We're actively engaging the youth, we're actually engaging schools, we're engaging law enforcement, we're engaging courts and probation, all of these different players at the table. And that allows us to have that direct and consistent presence that really is there to better serve community.
Thank you, Richard. I'm conscious of time, and so I'm going to ask our panelists here for the next series of questions that we could just keep it about a minute or so, and I'm sure we're going to have some time for Q&A here. And so I want to go to Keisha, very similar question, Keisha, which is, how do the federal resources awarded to your organization support your mission, and what has that funding made possible thus far?
Absolutely. This funding has allowed us to take our program from a pilot phase of serving only 25 people in a county with thousands of backlog gun cases. We were able to double our services. We were able to onboard additional staff, put in place a full-fledged evaluation in partnership with John Jay College. In addition to that, we really were able to provide supports for our young people who are going through the program to strengthen their ties to the community, ensure that they receive the educational support services that they need to truly be successful. Our program is unique because it's led by credible messengers with lived experience. We're able now to pay our folks that work for us a living wage to bring their expertise and mentorship to our participants to ensure their success on the ground.
Beautiful. Now, can you just clarify, what does lived experience really mean for those who might not necessarily know?
Folks who have lived experience in their communities, former contact with the criminal legal system themselves, folks who have suffered whatever experiences, lived experiences that our same participants are going through.
Thanks for clarifying that. Next question, and I'm looking at Von Bryant here. Like, a lot has been said about this work, whether what the impact that we're having or not. Plenty of research out there. Our NIJ program within OJP constantly pushing out what we're learning around this field. And so a question for you really is, how do you measure success? You know, and not just around data, but if you had that would be great. How other methods you measure success? And are there any stories or moments you're most proud of?
So I would say, obviously, I don't need this. Shootings and homicides is, we can start with that because that, is the clear measure that we're all focused on. And so Communities Partnering for Peace is in 27 neighborhoods in Chicago. And, when you compare 2022 to 2021, we were 21 of our 27 neighborhoods were down in terms of both shootings and homicides, and 11 of those neighborhoods are down 20% or more. So I say that with the caveat that we are still above pre-pandemic numbers. When we first got started, our first 30 months, we were down 1% a month, which was a total of about 17%. The pandemic took us in a different direction. But other than that, I would say it's based on, our direct service. So we have a Metropolitan Peace Academy where we've graduated over 350 outreach workers. And, when I look at our first cohort, we have people like George Matos, who's replaced you at Ready Chicago, or Chris Patterson, who was Assistant Secretary for the state of Illinois, or Rodney Phillips here in the crowd today, who's just been promoted to assistant director of our crisis response unit. So seeing guys who have lived experience, who are gaining professional experience, but also being promoted in their field, I think is one of the things that we really pay attention to. Same thing we want to pay attention to with our participants. Are they giving us those pro-social behaviors? Are they, getting skilled? Are they getting healed? Are they getting jobs? Are they sustaining those jobs? Those are the things that are ultimately going to push our work forward and ultimately not need this work in the same way.
Thank you, Vaughn. Similar question, Keisha. I'm looking at you here. You mentioned just a second ago partnerships with John Jay College, right? The reputation that Osborne has is very positive when we hear about people who have been doing this work for some time. And so similar question, how do you measure success? And are there any stories or moments you're most proud of?
Absolutely. We measure our success in a number of ways, but just to start off, in our pilot year, 72% of our folks who came through the pilot program successfully completed. So we look at things at engagement, participation, educational attainment, whether they go on to further their education or they open up their own businesses. We look at how the progress that they've made through coming through the program. That's just one area. Additionally, we have a number of participants who've come through who have gone on to be successful entrepreneurs, folks who have gone through the program and opened up their own businesses, became barbers, opened up trucking companies. So we want to ensure that they are connected financially to sustainable jobs or opportunities, also that they're connected to their families. We also look at successful connections to mental health services. We do full-fledged assessments at intake and ongoing. We ensure that our participants are meeting regularly with their clinicians to ensure that their mental health needs are being addressed. So those are all areas and markers for success. We also look at the level of engagement that they continue to have with their mentors weekly. So there's continuous assessment as far as that is concerned. We look at how our participants continue to retain and stay engaged with the program once they successfully complete with the course. So there are a number of markers that we use. And I have a team of my folks here that came today who are on the ground doing the work, who will be able to answer questions later as well.
Amazing, amazing. You know, this idea of success, right? She mentioned 72%. And, you know, some people would say, well, it's a 72%. I mean, that's good, but it's not great. It just depends, because a lot of times the folks that you are working with, each one of you are working with, success is very different.
It looks
Sometimes
different.
success is about housing. Sometimes it's going
Absolutely.
from a violent offense to maybe a misdemeanor. Sometimes it's about, you know, supporting the family overall. And so many of you have different successes, measurements for success. You know, unfortunately, this past Monday, I woke up that morning as I was heading to Atlanta, where a young man, first name is Joshua, was killed in the south side of Chicago, shot multiple times. And, you know, I think about the support that I've known the mother, I've known the stepfather for many, many years. And the stepfather has been doing really good, has a job, has been working for about 7, 8 years already, made a lot of progress, has not gone back to prison, has not reoffended. 2 years before that, daughter passed away, overdosed. And you think about the trauma that it has, right? You think about success. Well, that young man reintegrated back into schools, and for whatever reason, his life was cut short. And it's easy to blame people or blame systems, but at the end of the day, you think about the success to whatever degree the mother and the stepfather have taken in the last several years to kind of continue to figure out how to support their family. Like that's a very powerful, you know, story in terms of how we think about what we're measuring and what is success in the lives of these individuals. And so while Joshua may not be here today, and it's unfortunate, there's still a lot of opportunities to continue to engage the family in these issues. And it sounds to me that many of you are actually doing just that. You know, Brother Lyle mentioned this even earlier as well. So I'm going to ask my last question here. I know we're about you know, out of time. And so I want to start off with Mona. You know, we know that this work can be challenging. What are some of the opportunities you see in the CVI field in the future? And what keeps you motivated to continue working to build safer communities?
The success, it looks different in each community, but this work is not new. It's been happening for decades, and we've seen the impact of it. This work really understands that community members, as Keisha was saying, who are relatable, who understand the problem firsthand, are going to be the messengers for this work. And what this funding is allowing us to do is to really build a community of practice, to bring to practitioners together from across the country to share strategies, to share lessons learned, to share the real difficulties, how to get the program started. It's also really unprecedented in that the sort of motivation is coming from community-based organizations that we have known for decades, who have struggled to get the funding to sustain work that is so powerful. And now here we have pass-through dollars to be able to seed this work and be able to kind of sustain work for the next few years. So I think it's for us, it's really a combination of being able to bring practitioners around the country together and really at a local level to be able to fund this work to the groups that are really kind of moving the needle locally.
Thank you, Mona. Same question for you, Richard.
So for us, what we're seeing is that the field itself is being recognized as an important part and a key component to public health and safety. That we're hearing from local law enforcement schools that we can't do this work. We're tired. This is not what we're built for. This is not the experience and the life and the place of the gifts that I have to give to community. So we're seeing this happen over and over again. And so as this occurs, we're seeing this whole profession to start mature more and more, and that these professionals are able to get the capacity building, the technical assistance, the training that make them more effective at serving community. So we're seeing this, we're believing it, we see the potential, and we think it's fully worthy as another strategy for public safety.
Thank you. So 30 seconds or less. I'm going to start with Keisha, the last part of this question, which is what keeps you motivated to continue working to build safer communities? 30 seconds or less.
What keeps me motivating is to see the change that's taking place in the young people that we serve, helping them move from point A to point B and see a full implementation of growth in their lives, seeing them take active roles in their own future success. And T, I'm looking at you. I want to just quote something that you always share with me, is that this is a process, right? And we meet people where they are, and we walk with them every day until they get to the end of their journey. So that's what keeps me motivated.
Thank you. Vaughn, 30 seconds less.
I would say what keeps me motivated is the people that we're trying to serve. I believe that everyone is born with a purpose, and it's our job to, help people find their gifts and, sort of enable them to pursue their purpose. And so that's what motivates me every day to support the organizations that then work with those people to live fulfilled lives.
Thank you. And Brother Lyle, do you want to close this up?
So I'll do my best. And I hope you all who are here are paying attention. Many people know that staffers are the smartest people that work in their offices. You didn't hear that from me, but you heard it from me. And I want you to critically understand that we're all here now at this hour to do this work that needs to be done now. And if we don't get it done, it's not going to get done. 2019, 9 members of our organization went on a 21-and-a-half-day hunger strike across the street from one of the most violent neighborhoods in all of Miami. Why do I mention that? Because about the 7th or 8th day into that hunger strike, we received some guests from about 40 miles up the road in a place called Parkland. And I need you to understand, because of that union, urban mass shootings, right, and suburban mass shootings are now being treated as shootings, and we're working together. We can't do that work without coming together. And then very lastly, in 15 seconds if I can, I think it's important to state that if we don't do our job, then the folks that we work for will not be properly informed.
That's what I thought.
And then, always to get some echo. Somebody's thinking good over there, right? So 15 seconds for that. And I want us all to critically understand that each component plays a role. We had a paradigm shift where we actually had a public health agency give us funding support to put boots on the ground. So now public health is really being looked at from a lens. And lastly, I have some staff members here as well. They did something in our community just a few days ago that the police couldn't do, the school couldn't do, the counselors couldn't do, the families couldn't do. They're needed everywhere. They're needed everywhere. And so please get a chance to talk to them. So what drives me from success? If we don't get it done, let's get ready for more blood-led legislation instead of head-led legislation.
Thank you. Well, stick around because we're going to have a Q&A in just a few minutes. And before we do, I'm going to encourage our guests here to stick around as long as you can. They're not going to kick us out this room exactly 2 o'clock, but we're hoping to be able to answer some questions shortly after I actually introduce and you hear directly from a great friend, Shiro from Los Angeles. It is my distinct honor to introduce Deputy Chief Emara Tringaridis, is a native of Los Angeles who has decided to become a police officer following a wave of civil unrest in the city in 1992. 1992. I was 16 years old back then. She rose through the ranks, and in August of 2020, became deputy chief and commanding officer of a new Community Safety Partnership Bureau. Please give her a hand of applause.
Represent myself here. Good afternoon. Thank you for that introduction.
I am so full today. I have been working with intervention since 2004. I'm in my 28th year with the Los Angeles Police Department, and I'm serving in some of the most violent and underserved communities in the city of Los Angeles. And to sit here today and hear from each and every one of you the work that you are doing, the purpose, and the answer to what everyone across this country is asking for is tremendous. Thank you so much for filling my cup today and for the work that you're doing. I am the commanding officer and I oversee a relationship-based policing philosophy in Los Angeles called Community Safety Partnership. And it actually is the brainchild of a civil rights attorney, Connie Rice, working in conjunction with our mayor's office, Gang Reduction and Youth Development, and the Housing Authority, City of Los Angeles. In 2009, I was blessed enough to help implement and create this relationship-based policing philosophy. And it is everything that has been talked about today. And we ask our officers to commit to a minimum of 5 years working in these communities, not from a suppression over policing philosophy, but from a relationship-based policing philosophy, looking at the vectors and the root causes of why there's trauma and crime in our communities, and then working with our partners to make a difference. And that partnership has to involve an unarmed response. It has to involve people with lived experience. It has to involve a public health approach, intervention and prevention, working alongside law enforcement to make that change. The support that is needed for these organizations is critical in the answer of how to change policing across our country. We recently had Memphis, Tennessee, the murder of Tyree Nichols, the murder of George Floyd. And everyone is asking, what is the answer to prevent incidents like that? You heard it today. Building the capacity of these communities and allowing them to have a voice in how they're policed, having a voice in the training so that officers understand the culture and the history of the communities that they're working in, and allowing these intervention and prevention agencies to uplift that voice and make a difference in the communities alongside law enforcement. I want to tell a brief story because I know I only had 5 minutes. One of the neighborhood engagement areas that our CSP officers work in is Nickerson Gardens. It's the largest public housing development west of the Mississippi, centered in the community of Watts, the epicenter of the Watts riots. And during the summer, these public housing developments, you talked about economic development and infrastructure in communities. Those things are important in reducing crime and increasing public safety in our communities. These public housing developments were built after World War II. There's no air conditioning. They're insulated, they're brick, and they're hot. So during the summer, what does everyone do? They go out, I heard you say it out loud. They go outside, and then they don't have a front yard or a backyard. So what else might happen? Get heated, but we might be drinking a little from a red cup. Absolutely, right? And some quality of life issues that from the community's perspective, that's all that they have. So there's nothing wrong with that. And we had an incident just a few weeks ago where there was a large group. We had over 100 individuals hanging out in the public housing developments. And unfortunately, there was a clash between the police and the community, and there was a use of force. Our bureau, myself and my officers, put a notice out. We met with intervention, we met with prevention, and this is a practice that CSP officers have been doing for over a decade. But we wanted to ensure that the broader officers within LAPD understood this practice. And that notice was basically called Best Practices to Deal with Large Groups united with our intervention and prevention agencies. So the next day I had a captain call me and she said, it worked. We had a large group gathering. We did what you said. We made one phone call to the intervention coordinator. They went out to the community. They dispersed the crowd. We didn't have to have a use of force. There were some phone numbers exchanged. Everyone went home safe, the officer and the community. When we talk about intervention and prevention and we think about law enforcement and having less controversial critical incidents when law enforcement comes in contact with people in the community, this work is a de-escalation tool. It keeps officers safe and it keeps the community safe. The last thing that I want to talk about is culture change. I've been doing this work for almost 30 years, and I understand the power of partnerships. We cannot do it alone. Mr. Muhammad, you said it best, correct? We need to all come together and be part of the solution. If we don't have the technical assistance, we don't have the funding to keep these agencies up and running, we are adding to the problems in our community and we are letting them down again. This has to be sustainable. We have to have the resources. Law enforcement has to continue to change our culture internally to allow this work and work alongside organizations like these to make a difference in our communities. And I think my time is up. Thank you.